The chandeliers at Salvetti shimmered like frozen rain, scattering their light across marble floors, polished so perfectly that every reflection looked like a ghost. Lily Adams moved quietly between tables, balancing a tray of crystal glasses with the kind of practiced grace that came from months of learning how not to be seen. She'd perfected it, the art of invisibility. Shoulders back, eyes lowered, smile soft enough to seem polite but never inviting. People noticed the wine, not the girl who poured it. That was the way she liked it. The city's most powerful men dined here, their laughter echoing through the golden light, their words heavy with secrets they assumed no one could hear. Lily heard everything. She carried fragments of conversations in her mind, like broken glass, careful not to let any of them cut too deep. Real estate deals, political favors, whispered threats disguised as jokes. All of it floating past her like a language she understood too well, but was forbidden to speak. By day, she was a student at the university, studying linguistics and international relations. Her classmates thought she was quiet because she was focused. In truth, she'd spent her whole life learning to blend in. Chicago was supposed to be her new start. Far from Boston, far from the name she never wanted to hear again. She'd dyed her hair, changed her accent, changed everything that could be changed. Still, some nights, when the kitchen noise faded and the violinist's music softened, she could almost feel the weight of the name she had buried. "Table 7 needs water," called Heather, the head waitress, not even looking up from her tablet. "And make sure Mr. Alvarez's wine is room temperature this time." "Yes, of course," Lily said automatically, her voice low. She turned toward the cellar, letting her steps fall into rhythm with the music. She liked the quiet moments between, and tasks. Those rare breaths where she could pretend she was just another girl paying her way through school. But the illusion broke with a single word. Corsetti. The name came from a group of businessmen at the bar, spoken in the kind of hushed tone that carried more weight than a shout. Lily froze, her hand tightening around the neck of the wine bottle until her knuckles turned white. She forced herself to keep walking, to breathe evenly, but inside her chest, her heart beat faster than the violins. She hadn't heard that name in years, not since she left Boston. The Corsettis, the family her father despised, the name whispered like a curse around dinner tables, the rivals who had ruined alliances and started wars. "Apparently the son's taking over," one of the men said. "Dante Corsetti, ruthless as his father, just quieter about it." The name hit her like a cold wave. Dante Corsetti. She had never met him, but she knew the stories. The way people described him as both a gentleman and a ghost, the man who could make deals vanish as easily as enemies. Lily placed the wine on the table, forcing her hands to stay steady. She could almost hear her father's voice from years ago, rough with whiskey and warning. "Never trust a Corsetti, Lily. They smile before they destroy you." She swallowed hard and returned to the server station, trying to shake the feeling crawling up her spine. Maybe it was just coincidence. Chicago was full of Corsettis, surely, but the way the room shifted when the name was spoken, that hush of respect and fear, told her this wasn't just anyone. Then the door opened. A gust of cold night air swept through the restaurant, carrying the faint scent of rain and city smoke. Every head turned. A tall man stepped inside, his presence slicing through the elegant murmur like a blade. His suit was black, tailored within an inch of perfection, his hair dark and slicked back, and his eyes, sharp, unreadable, scanned the room with quiet command. Lily didn't need to hear his name. She knew it. She felt it. Dante Corsetti had arrived at Salvetti. He didn't move like the other men. No arrogance, no swagger. He moved like someone who owned the air around him and didn't need to prove it. The maitre d' hurried to greet him, voice trembling with deference. Lily stood still behind the counter, hidden in the shadow of a column, unable to look away. For the first time in months, she wasn't invisible. Not because he saw her, but because every instinct in her body screamed that this man, this name, would change everything she'd tried to build. And deep down, though she would never admit it, a quiet part of her already knew. The moment he looked up, the fragile life she'd built would begin to unravel. The next evening, the city shimmered under a light drizzle, and the reflections on the restaurant windows made it look like the stars had fallen to earth. Lily Adams adjusted her apron for the third time that night, trying to calm the storm building in her chest. It had been 24 hours since Dante Corsetti walked into Salvetti, and even now she could still feel the weight of his presence like a lingering scent she couldn't shake. She kept her head down, moved faster, smiled more, everything to keep her mind from drifting back to those dark eyes that had scanned the room and somehow seen straight through her. He was back tonight. She felt it before she saw him. The quiet shift in energy, the subtle pause in the chatter of the wealthy guests. It was as if the air itself leaned closer, holding its breath when he entered. There was no need for the maitre d's soft announcement. The staff just knew the way. Animals sense a storm before it breaks. Lily carried a tray of wine glasses toward table 9, her steps steady despite the pulse of unease in her veins, and then she saw him seated at the same corner table as the night before, his mother beside him, a vision of grace with silver hair pulled into a P. Perfect twist her movements, elegant yet restrained as if she were listening to a melody only she could hear. Dante spoke softly to the server next to him, then glanced toward Lily, and for a heartbeat their eyes met. It was brief but enough to freeze her in place. She forced herself to keep walking, pretending not to notice, but her mind raced. The Corsettis were more than a name. They were a warning whispered in her childhood home. She had no business being near them. Yet, here she was refilling their glasses, pretending not to tremble when Dante's deep voice reached her. "Thank you, Miss Adams," he said, and there was something in his tone that made her wonder if he was testing the name. She'd chosen his mother. Signed something quickly, her hands graceful and sure. Lily blinked. The older woman was deaf, and she was trying to get Dante's attention without thinking. Lily set the tray down and began to sign back. "It's all right, ma'am. What do you need?" The woman's face lit up in surprise and warmth. She signed. "You know how to speak like this?" Lily nodded. "Yes, my cousin was deaf. I learned when I was young." The woman smiled, her whole expression softening. "You have kind hands," she signed. "Not many. Take the time to learn." The restaurant fell quiet. Diners turned discreetly, watching the exchange as if unable to believe what they were seeing. Dante's expression was unreadable, but there was something fierce in his gaze, a mix of curiosity and suspicion. When his mother laughed silently, clapping her hands in delight, he looked at Lily in a way that made her heart stumble. After a moment, Lily stepped back. Cheeks flushed, she turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. "Where did you learn that?" he asked quietly. She hesitated, then said, "My cousin taught me. It's been a long time." His eyes narrowed just slightly. "Your accent slips." "Sometimes Boston, isn't it?" She froze. The sound of the city seemed to fade, her throat tightening. "Yes," she said quickly, trying to sound casual, but her pulse betrayed her. She picked up the tray and turned to go, but his next words came like a spark to dry tinder. "You hide it well, Miss Adams, but not perfectly." The words struck deep. She could feel his gaze following her as she hurried toward the kitchen, her breath unsteady inside her chest. She told herself it meant nothing. He couldn't know who she really was. He couldn't know what she'd run from yet. The way he said her name felt like a promise that her secrets were no longer hers alone. Hours later, when the restaurant emptied and the lights dimmed, Lily stood alone by the sink, washing the last of the glasses. She tried to push the memory away, but every time she closed her eyes, she saw Dante Corsetti's face, calm, powerful, and far too perceptive. She didn't know what frightened her more, that he might expose her, or that a part of her didn't want to stay invisible anymore. Rain poured against the tall windows of Salvetti, turning the night into a blur of lights and shadows. Lily Adams tightened her grip on the tray, her fingers trembling as she tried to steady her breathing. Every nerve in her body was on edge since that night when Dante Corsetti had looked at her as if he could read the truth she had buried years ago. She told herself to stay calm, to act normal, to pretend the air around her didn't hum with the memory of his voice saying her name. But pretending was becoming harder every second he was here again. Dante sat in his usual corner, the low, golden light wrapping around him like a secret, the way he held his wine glass, the quiet control in his movements, the intensity of his gaze. It made everyone in the restaurant cautious. Even the owner hovered nearby, pretending to check on guests, when in truth he was just making sure Dante Corsetti was pleased. Lily kept her eyes low, trying not to look at him, but curiosity was stronger than fear. She stole a glance and found him watching her, not the way rich men looked at waitresses, not with arrogance or hunger, but with sharp calculation, as if every flick of her expression told him a story. He raised a hand, motioning her over. Lily hesitated, but the manager appeared at her side, whispering, "He asked for you directly. Go now, before he thinks we're being rude." She swallowed hard and crossed the room, each step echoing louder than it should. Her voice was quiet when she reached his table. "Good evening, Mr. Corsetti. What can I get for you?" He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Sit down for a moment." "Miss Adams?" Her heart stuttered. "Sir, I should be working." "Please," he said softly. But the tone wasn't a request. It was command wrapped in velvet. She sat at the edge of the chair, her back straight, her hands folded tight in her lap. Dante studied her for a moment, then spoke in that calm, deep voice that could make a lie sound like truth. "Your signing the other night, it was impressive. Most people can't speak it fluently unless they have a reason." Lily forced a small smile. "My cousin needed it. I learned to help him." He nodded slowly. "A convenient story. But I think there's more to it. Your accent, your poise, the way you notice everything, and yet pretend you don't. People like. You don't just appear out of nowhere." Lily felt the blood drain from her face. "I don't know what you mean. Oh, I think you do?" He leaned forward, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "I did some checking since we met. The name Adams doesn't exist, not in Chicago, not anywhere before 6 months ago. Who were you before you decided to become invisible?" Panic rose in her throat, but she hid it behind a polite smile. "Maybe you misheard my name, Mr. Corsetti. I'm just a student. I work here to pay for college, that's all." He chuckled quietly, a sound that sent a chill down her spine. "You're brave to lie to me." To my face for a moment, the restaurant around them seemed to fade, leaving only the two of them, the storm outside thundering like her heartbeat. He wasn't threatening her. Not yet, but there was power in his voice that made the truth tremble at the edge of confession. Finally he spoke again, his tone shifting. "My mother hasn't stopped talking about you," she says. "You reminded her that kindness still exists in the city. I don't meet many people who make her smile." "Thank you for that." The words disarmed her, catching her off guard beneath his hard exterior. There was something unexpected, something human. It unsettled her more than the danger ever could. She found herself whispering, "She's a remarkable woman, sir. It was an honor to speak with her." Dante's gaze softened just slightly, then turned distant, as if a thought had crossed his mind that he couldn't say aloud. He rose from his chair, straightening his suit. "You should be careful. Miss Adams' Chicago remembers everything, even people who try to disappear." And before she could answer, he walked away, leaving her staring after him, the sound of his footsteps echoing in her chest like a warning she couldn't ignore. When she finally moved again, she realized her hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped the tray. Something told her that night had shifted everything. Her past was no longer hidden, and the man who could destroy it had just taken an interest in her. The morning light crept through the blinds of Lily's small apartment, turning the dust in the air into 1,000 glittering secrets she hadn't slept. Her thoughts replayed every word from last night. Dante Corsetti's voice, his questions, the quiet way he said her name as if testing its truth. She had built this life carefully, layer by layer, lie by lie. But he had peeled through it in minutes. It wasn't just his power that frightened her. It was how easily he saw her. She tried to focus on her classes that day, but the words on the page blurred. She couldn't shake the image of him sitting there, calm, unreadable eyes that missed nothing. She told herself it was fine. She would avoid him, keep her distance, pretend he had lost interest, but deep down, she knew Dan. Corsetti wasn't the kind of man who lost interest once something caught his attention. That night the rain returned soft but steady, like the city was whispering warnings. She arrived early at Salvetti, hoping to bury herself in work, but the manager intercepted her at the entrance, his face pale and uncertain. "Mr. Corsetti has requested you for a private table again." Lily froze. "What do you mean, requested?" "He booked the table for 2. "But he's alone," the manager said quietly, and then after a pause, "Be careful." Her pulse quickened as she approached the familiar corner. Dante was waiting, the dim light catching the sharp line of his jaw. He didn't look up immediately, as if giving her a chance to turn back before stepping into his world. But she didn't turn back. She couldn't. "Good evening, Mr. Corsetti," she said, keeping her voice steady. He gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit down, Lily." "Not Miss Adams." "Lily," she hesitated, then obeyed. The sound of her real name. From his lips was both terrifying and intimate. He studied her for a long moment, then said, "You've been running for a long time, haven't you?" She felt her breath catch. "I don't know what you're talking about." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "I know who you are. Lily O'Malley, the daughter of Patrick O'Malley from South Boston, the same family my father fought for 30 years. Silence fell between them. The world outside the restaurant seemed to vanish. All she could hear was her heartbeat crashing in her ears. "How did you find out?" she whispered. He smiled faintly. "The same way I find out everything. I listen. You should be more careful when you speak in your sleep. You said your brother's name 2 nights ago, Tommy. Right? That was enough to open every door I needed." She felt cold, her secret life unraveling thread by thread. Dante's tone softened. "You have nothing to fear from me. If I wanted to expose you, I would have done it already, but I need to understand why the daughter of an Irish mob boss is serving wine in my restaurant instead of standing at his side." She looked at him, anger flickering beneath her fear. "I left that life years ago. My father disowned me. I wanted nothing to do with his business or his violence." Dante studied her as if weighing every word. "I believe you," he said finally. "But others won't. Your father has enemies, and some of them are mine when they find out who you are. They won't care that you've tried to disappear. Why are you telling me this?" she asked quietly. "Because you're already on their radar, and because my mother likes you too much to see you hurt." The mention of his mother caught her off guard. The memory of the gentle woman signing with warmth and gratitude filled her with conflicting emotions. Dante's gaze softened. "She reminded me today that mercy doesn't make a man weak. Maybe she's right." Lily's chest tightened. She wanted to hate him, to run from him, but there was something in his voice that sounded almost protective. He reached into his jacket and placed a folded note on the table, an address written in clean, bold handwriting. "If anything feels wrong, if someone follows you, go there. One of my men will keep you safe." She stared at the paper, uncertain of what terrified her more. The danger chasing her or the possibility that Dante Corsetti might truly care what happened to her. He leaned closer one last time, his voice dropping to a whisper. "We are both children of enemies, Lily. Maybe it's time we stop pretending that history decides who we are." She walked away, shaking her hands, trembling around the note in her pocket. The night outside felt heavier than usual, and for the first time since she had run from Boston, she realized she wasn't just hiding anymore, she was being hunted. The next morning, the city woke under a low gray sky, and the wind carried the chill of something waiting to happen. Lily sat in the back of a small coffee shop, staring into her untouched cup. Her hands trembled no matter how tightly she folded. She had memorized every word Dante Corsetti had said to her, every look, every warning. It wasn't just that he knew her name. It was the strange way he seemed to care when no one else ever had, that terrified her more than his threats. Her phone buzzed a message from the restaurant manager. "You're requested to assist Mrs. Corsetti this afternoon. Private lunch. Bring the wine list." Lily's stomach knotted. She had spent all morning telling herself she'd stay away from them, yet now she was being pulled back into their orbit. Maybe refusing wasn't an option anymore. The Corsetti mansion sat on the north side of the city, hidden behind tall iron gates and trees that seemed older than time. When Lily arrived, the rain had stopped, but the air still smelled of it. She was greeted by a housekeeper who spoke softly, as if afraid of disturbing the silence inside the house was a museum of gold and shadows. Hallways lined with portraits of men whose eyes followed her every step. Mrs. Corsetti waited in a glass garden room surrounded by roses. Her hands moving gracefully in the air. When she saw Lily, she smiled warmly, signing, "It's good to see you again." "My dear, I was hoping you would come," Lily signed back. "Thank you for inviting me. Your home is beautiful." The older woman's laughter was silent but full of life. It's a prison sometimes, but today it feels brighter with company. For a while they spoke only in signs, their conversation gentle and calm about art, about the weather, about small things that made the world feel simple, but beneath it all was a current of something deeper. Mrs. Corsetti's eyes held too much knowledge for the innocence she pretended to wear. "You remind me of my younger self," the woman signed. "I was quiet too when I first married into this family. Silence can be a shield, but it can also become a cage." Lily hesitated, unsure how to answer before she could respond. A voice broke the peace. "My mother likes to talk in riddles," Dante said, entering from the terrace, his suit dark, his expression unreadable. He kissed. His mother's cheek then turned to Lily, his gaze lingering just long enough to make her pulse quicken. "You came. I wasn't sure you would. I didn't think I had a choice," she replied softly. Dante smiled, a slow, dangerous smile. "There's always a choice, Lily. But choices have consequences. Mrs. Corsetti touched her son's arm gently, signing, "Be kind. She's frightened." Dante's eyes softened, but only for a second. When he turned back to Lily, there was something sharper in his tone. "My men spotted someone watching your apartment last night," he said, an Irishman's scar above his eye. "Does that sound familiar?" Her heart stopped. Declan. "He worked for my father," she whispered. Then realization struck. "If he's here, it means they found me." "Yes, and that means you can't go back there," Dante said, his voice calm but absolute. "You'll stay here tonight. My mother insists." Lily looked at the older woman, who nodded firmly, signing, "You're safe here, child. The walls of this house keep many secrets." As night fell, the mansion changed. The lights dimmed and the corridors filled with whispers. Lily stood at the window of the guest room, watching rain return in slow, silver streaks. Her reflection stared back, pale eyes wide, her mind replaying Dante's warning. She wasn't safe anymore. Not anywhere. A soft knock pulled her from her thoughts. She opened the door to find Dante standing there holding a small glass of brandy for the nerves, he said quietly. She accepted it, her fingers brushing his. For a second, the contact sent a shiver through her. His voice lowered. "I need to know something before this gets worse. Why did you really leave Boston?" "Lily." She looked at him, the words rising like smoke in her throat. "Because my father wanted me to marry a man twice my age to strengthen his alliance. I refused. He called me a disgrace and sent his men after me. I ran and never looked back." Dante studied her face for a long moment, the storm outside flashing light across his eyes. "You chose freedom over power," he said slowly. "That's rare in our world. Freedom doesn't feel real when you're always looking over your shoulder," she whispered. He stepped closer, just enough that she could smell the faint scent of rain and smoke on him. "You don't have to run anymore, not from them, not from your name. But remember, Lily, once you stand with me, there's no going back." The thunder outside answered for her, shaking the glass walls, as if the city itself understood what she was about to face that night as she lay awake in the quiet mansion. She realized that her life had already changed, and Dante Corsetti was the reason why the night stretched long and restless in the Corsetti mansion. Thunder rolled across the city, and rain traced crooked lines down the tall glass windows. Lily lay awake, listening to the silence between storms. Her thoughts heavy with questions she couldn't escape every choice she had made since Boston had been about survival. Yet here she was again, trapped between power and danger. Her name once buried, now hanging in the air like a ghost she could no longer outrun. When dawn came, the storm had passed, but the unease stayed. Dante's mother greeted her at breakfast, signing, "Good morning, child. Did you sleep?" Lily managed a small smile. "Not really." Mrs. Corsetti's eyes softened and she signed back. "Few people sleep peacefully under this roof. The walls remember too much." She reached over and touched Lily's hand. "You are brave to still be here." The moment was broken by the sound of footsteps. Dante entered, dressed in black, his expression unreadable. He carried his phone in one hand, tension shadowing his movements. "We need to talk," he said. The words clipped, controlled. Lily followed him into his study. The room smelled of leather and smoke, the curtains drawn tight against the morning light. He closed the door behind them, his gaze sharp as a blade. "One broke into my warehouse last night," he said. Without preamble, they took shipment records and one of my men caught a glimpse of the thief, an Irishman. She went cold. "Declan," her voice barely a whisper. Dante nodded. "You know him. He's one of my father's men, loyal to Flanagan more than to my father," she said, her stomach twisting. "If Declan is here, it means Flanagan knows where I am." Dante leaned forward, resting his hands on the desk. He was no longer the calm observer from the restaurant. There was danger in his stillness. "My sources tell me Flanagan is planning a move against your father. A takeover. He's working with outside families, Russian ones. If that happens, the city will drown in blood." He paused, his eyes locking with hers. "I need to know everything about Flanagan, where he hides, how he thinks, who he trusts." Lily shook her head. "I can't, Dante. It's been years since I left. I don't know what he's planning." "You know enough," he replied quietly, "and whether you like it or not, you're already part of this." The moment your name resurfaced, you became a target. The truth hit her hard and heavy. She turned away from him, staring at the rain streaking down the window. "I wanted a normal life," she whispered. "I just wanted to disappear." His voice softened. "Then, why didn't you? You could have run farther?" Changed everything, but you stayed close to Chicago. Maybe part of you knew this would catch up with you?" She turned to face him, anger and fear clashing inside her. "What do you want from me?" "Dante, why not just hand me over? Let my father and Flanagan destroy each other." He stepped closer, his voice low, "Because I don't want their war to reach my mother or you." The way he said it stopped her heart for a moment. He wasn't lying. There was something raw in his tone, something that sounded like protection, maybe even something more. He reached into his jacket, pulling out a small black phone. "This number reaches only me. If you see anything, hear anything strange?" "You call understood." She took the phone. Their fingers brushing the contact sparked something electric between them that neither wanted to name. Dante's gaze held, hers for a long heartbeat before he turned away. That evening, the mansion grew quiet. Mrs. Corsetti retired early, leaving Lily alone in the library. Thunder rumbled again, far off, the kind of warning sound that made her pulse quicken. She tried to distract herself, reading old books, but the words blurred together. Then a faint noise echoed from the hallway. Soft, deliberate footsteps. She stood frozen, listening. The sound grew closer, slow and careful, like someone avoiding the creak of the floorboards. She moved silently toward the door, her heart pounding through the shadows. A silhouette appeared, a tall figure approaching. She caught a glint of metal before instinct took over. She ducked back into the room, grabbing the nearest thing she could find. A brass candlestick. The door opened and Dante stepped in, holding a gun lowered, not raised his eyes, sharp. "You have good instincts," he said quietly. "There's someone on the property. My men are already moving. Stay behind me." Before she could answer, a gunshot shattered the air glass, exploded across the floor. Dante pulled her down, shielding her as another shot tore through the window. He moved faster than she thought possible, dragging her through a side corridor into the servants' passageway, his voice low and calm. "Stay close. Don't look back." They reached a hidden stairway behind the kitchen. The smell of smoke and rain filled the air as headlights flashed outside. Dante's men were shouting orders and returning fire. He pushed open a door leading to the garage where a black SUV waited. "Get in," he said. She hesitated, but the look in his eyes left no space for argument as the car sped into the night. The mansion shrinking behind them, Lily pressed her shaking hands to her chest. She glanced at Dante, whose face was set in stone, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on the road. "Who are they?" she asked. Finally, he exhaled. "Flanagan's men. He said they weren't coming to." "Oh, scare you, Lily. They were coming to take you." The city lights blurred past and she realized her life had shifted again. She wasn't just running from her past anymore. She was being dragged back into it, and the only man who could keep her alive was the one her family had sworn was their greatest enemy. The black SUV raced through the wet Chicago streets, the tires cutting through puddles as if fleeing ghosts. Lily clutched the seat, her breath uneven. She could still smell the smoke from the Corsetti mansion, hear the echo of gunfire behind them. Dante drove with one hand steady, the other resting near his weapon, his eyes never leaving the road, even as lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the sharp lines of his face. "Where are we going?" she finally asked, her voice trembling. "A safe house by the lake," he said quietly. "No one knows about it, not even most of my men. It belonged to my mother, before my father bought the city around it." He glanced at her in the mirror. "You're safe for now." "For now," she repeated softly, staring out the window at the blur of passing lights. The city that had once felt like freedom now looked like a trap. Every shadow seemed to move, every corner whispered her name. She turned to him. "You should have left me there. They were after me, not you." Dante's grip on the wheel tightened. "I don't abandon people under my protection, Lily, and right now, whether you like it or not, that includes you." They drove in silence for the next hour, the storm easing into a soft drizzle. When the car finally stopped, the house appeared at the edge of a lake, dark wood walls gleaming under the moonlight. It looked peaceful, untouched by the chaos of the city, but Lily knew peace was an illusion here. Just another disguise. Inside the cabin smelled faintly of cedar and rain. The rooms were simple, but warm. A fire crackled in the hearth as if waiting for them. Dante poured 2 glasses of whiskey and handed her one drink. He said, "You'll need it." She didn't argue. The burn of the liquid grounded her enough to speak. "Who were those men at the mansion, Flanagan's?" she asked. "Yes," he replied, his tone low and grim. "They were after you. But not just to kill you. They wanted to use you to force your father's hand." She shook her head, confused. "My father disowned me years ago. He wouldn't risk anything for me." Dante looked at her, then something cold and knowing in his. The sun was setting behind the city, casting a blood-red glow over the skyline as the black SUV pulled up to a secluded lakeside cabin. Lily stared out the window, her pulse still racing from the chaos of the night before. Dante had barely spoken since they left Chicago, his face unreadable, his hands gripping the wheel as if holding the world together. She didn't know if she was safe or trapped. She only knew that something had changed between them. Inside the cabin, the air smelled of pine and rain. The silence felt heavier than before. Dante checked the locks, then turned to her, his voice low but steady. "You need to understand, Lily. This isn't just about you anymore. Flanagan has made his move. He's cutting deals with Russian brokers to take down both families." Her heart tightened. "Both families? You mean yours and mine?" "Yes," Dante said. "And when he's done, he'll come for your brothers. He already sent someone to watch Tommy at his college." Lily felt the floor drop beneath her. She clutched the edge of the table. "No, not Tommy. He's just a kid." Dante met her gaze. "There's a flight leaving at dawn. I can send someone to bring him here." She nodded silently, tears burning behind her eyes. For the first time since she left home, she wished she could see her family, even just once, without fear, without pretending. Hours passed, and the world outside turned quiet. Dante sat across from her, studying maps and files, his bruised knuckles catching the light. Lily watched him, his focus, his control, and beneath it all, the exhaustion that came from carrying too much. She finally spoke. "You could have left me at the mansion. Why are you still helping me?" He looked up the answer, simple but heavy. "Because my mother trusts you, and because I don't like seeing good people destroyed by the sins of others." Before she could respond, his phone vibrated. He read the message, then cursed under his breath. "What is it?" she asked. "Flanagan has arranged a sit-down with your father tonight. Said it's about ending the old rivalry, but it's a trap. If Patrick O'Malley shows up, he'll never walk out alive." Lily's blood ran cold. "We have to stop him," she said, her voice trembling. "If my father dies, Flanagan takes everything and he'll start a war." Dante nodded. "That's why we're going there," she blinked. "You mean?" Now his tone left no room for argument. "Yes, now my men are already moving. I need your help. You know how Flanagan thinks, where he hides his leverage. You're the only one who can predict his next step." Lily hesitated, fear crawling up her spine. "I don't even know if my father will believe me. The last time we spoke, he called me a disgrace." Dante stepped closer, his voice firm but gentle. "Maybe, but he's still your father, and if anyone can get through to him, it's you." The drive to the docks was long and silent, the city's lights fading behind them, replaced by the dark open space of the harbor. The smell of salt and oil filled the air. Rain began to fall again, light at first, then heavier, like the sky itself was warning them what waited ahead. Dante's men spread out in the shadows, their movements precise. Professional Lily sat in the passenger seat, staring at the old warehouse that loomed over the water. "That's where he'll be," Dante said quietly. "Flanagan told your father it was neutral ground." Lily took a deep breath, then checked the small pistol he had given her. She hated the weight of it, hated how familiar it felt. She turned to Dante. "Promise me you won't let this turn into bloodshed." He gave a small grim smile. "I'll do my best. But in our world, peace doesn't come without a fight." Inside the warehouse, the air was thick with tension. Her father's voice echoed across the space, low and steady, as he greeted Flanagan. They were sitting at a table, 2 glasses between them and a laptop open nearby. Lily moved quietly through a side entrance, staying in the shadows. Her heart thundering, she saw Flanagan pour something into her father's glass. Her breath caught. She didn't think she moved, but suddenly she was there, bursting through the door, shouting, "Don't drink that!" Both men turned, shocked. Patrick's face went pale. "Lily, what in God's name are you doing here?" Flanagan's expression twisted into fury. "She's with the Corsettis," he snarled, reaching for his gun before he could fire. A single shot cracked through the air, and he froze, his hand inches from the weapon. Dante stepped from the shadows, his gun raised, his voice cold and calm. "It's over, Sean." The warehouse erupted in chaos, men shouting, weapons drawn. Flanagan lunged for cover, but Dante's men were already closing in. Patrick O'Malley stared at his daughter, disbelief warring with anger and grief. "What have you done, girl?" Lily slid the flash drive onto the table. "It's all here, Dad. Proof that Flanagan's been selling you out to the Russians and planning your death check. The messages, check the bank transfers, it's all there." Her father hesitated, then turned to the laptop, his face hardening as the truth appeared on the screen. betrayal in numbers and names. When he looked up at Flanagan, his voice shook with rage. "You sold me to the Russians after everything I did for you." The fight that followed was fast, brutal, the echoes of gunfire bouncing off the steel walls when it ended. Flanagan was gone, dragged away into the darkness by Dante's men. The warehouse smelled of smoke and betrayal. Lily stood shaking. Her father looked at her, eyes full of things unsaid. "Go," he told her, voice rough. "Before I change my mind." She wanted to hug H. But didn't dare. Dante took her arm, guiding her back toward the rain outside. She looked at him, tears mixing with water on her cheeks. "It's over," she whispered. "Not yet," he said quietly. "Now comes the part where we make sure it stays that way." As they drove away, the first light of dawn began to touch the horizon. Lily leaned her head against the window, exhausted, broken, but alive. Dante reached out his hand, resting it lightly over hers. For the first time she didn't pull away. The war that had shaped both their families was ending. But what waited next, she couldn't yet name. All she knew was that the man beside her had just risked everything to save her, and that was something her heart would never forget. The night after the dock confrontation, the city felt different, quieter, like it was holding its breath. The war between the Corsettis and the O'Malleys had stopped before it began, but the silence that followed was heavy with uncertainty. Lily sat by the window of the safe house, her reflection ghostly against the rain-streaked glass. She hadn't slept in 2 days. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the warehouse, the flash of gunfire, her father's face twisted between rage and love, and Dante standing in the crossfire without fear. He was outside now, speaking with his men near the lake, his shirt soaked from the rain, his movements controlled but tired. She could tell he hadn't rested either. She watched him through the fogged glass, feeling something she didn't want to name, somewhere between gratitude and longing. The door creaked behind her and Mrs. Corsetti entered, her steps slow, her eyes full of quiet wisdom. She signed, "You haven't eaten." Lily shook her head. "I can't." She signed back. Mrs. Corsetti smiled gently, then her hands moved again. "My son is stubborn, but his heart is good. You must not run from what frightens you." Lily hesitated, her throat tightening. "I've spent my whole life running." The older woman touched her shoulder softly, then left without another word, leaving behind a silence that felt almost like permission. Moments later, Ante stepped inside, dripping with rain, his hair damp, his sleeves rolled to his elbows. He looked like the storm itself, determined and dangerous. He closed the door behind him and said, "The Russians are moving. They've lost Flanagan and they want blood." He dropped a folder onto the table. Inside were photos, bank ledgers, encrypted messages, everything that proved the scale of the corruption. "They won't stop until they erase every witness, including your family and me." Lily's breath caught. "So what do we do?" Dante leaned over the table, his voice low. "We end it before they can strike again. One meeting, one move, and it's over." He looked up at her, eyes steady. "You don't have to come with me, Lily. But this all started because of what Flanagan did to your family. You deserve to see it finished." Her heart pounded. She thought of her brothers, of her father, of all the lives hanging in balance. Then she met his gaze. "I'm coming," she said. Dante nodded once. No argument, no surprise, only a flicker of something unspoken, respect, maybe even pride. By nightfall, they were back in the city, moving through the maze of wet streets, the car windows streaked with rain. The meeting point was an abandoned hotel near the river where the Russian envoy would be waiting. Dante's men followed in 2 black cars, the tension in the air thick enough to cut. Lily checked her weapon, trying not to show her fear. She glanced at Dante, who drove with one hand, his other resting lightly on the gear shift, his eyes fixed ahead. "Whatever happens tonight," he said, his voice calm, "I need you to trust me." She nodded. "I do." When they reached the hotel, the building loomed over them, dark windows like empty eyes. Dante turned off the engine, then looked at her one last time. "Stay behind me, no matter what happens." She opened her mouth to answer, but the sound of a gun clicking stopped her cold. Someone was already there. Men stepped out of the shadows, guns raised. The emblem of the Russian Brotherhood glinting on their jackets. Dante's hand went to his weapon, but before he could fire, a voice called. Out from the stairwell, calm, confident, dropped the gun. "Corsetti." It was a man with silver hair and a scar across his cheek, the kind of smile that never reached the eyes. "I heard you've been making trouble." Lily's blood turned to ice. She knew that voice from her childhood whispers in Boston, the one they used when they spoke of monsters. "Viktor Dragunov." Dante's expression didn't change. His voice stayed level. You came a long way for a meeting that wasn't yours. Dragunov smiled, stepping closer. Everything in this city is mine now. You just don't know it yet. He turned his gaze to Lily. And what do we have here? The O'Malley girl. She looks softer than the stories. Dante moved before she could react, his arm sweeping in front of her. Stay behind me, he warned. Dragunov laughed, so protective. Maybe I should have taken her instead of Flanagan would have saved me some time. Dante fired first, the bullet cutting through the silence. Chaos exploded. The sound of gunfire echoed off the walls, the room filled with smoke and shouting. Lily crouched behind a pillar, adrenaline burning through her veins. She saw Dante take down 2 men in seconds, moving like shadow and flame. But there were too many of them. Then she saw it. One of the Russians circling behind Dante, gun raised, aimed at his back. Without thinking, she ran her fingers closing around the weapon Dante had given her. She stood, aimed, and fired the shot. Hit the man squarely, the recoil jolting through her body. Her ears rang, the smell of gunpowder filling the air. Dante turned eyes wide for a moment before finishing the fight. Minutes later, it was over. Bodies on the ground. The echo of the final shot still ringing the rain outside louder than before. Dante lowered his gun, his chest heaving. He turned to Lily, his voice rough. You saved my life. She shook her head. No, we saved each other. Sirens wailed in the distance. They had only minutes before the police were. "See, arrived." Dante grabbed the flash drive from Dragunov's coat. "This ends it," he said. "This proves everything. The deals, the murders, the betrayal. Your father can use it to rebuild the O'Malleys without bloodshed," as they fled into the night. The first light of dawn began to break across the horizon. Lily looked at Dante beside her, rain streaking his face. The man her family had once called enemy, now the only person she trusted. The world around them was falling apart. But somehow in that moment she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope the war was ending, but her story with Dante was only beginning. The rain finally stopped, but the air still carried the scent of smoke and gunpowder as the first light of morning touched the skyline. Lily and Dante stood on the rooftop of a deserted parking structure, watching the city below. Sirens wailed in the distance, echoing off the wet concrete. Their hands were still trembling from what had just happened. The war was over. The evidence they carried in Dante's pocket could destroy every corrupt alliance between the Russians and Flanagan's men. But the quiet that followed didn't feel like peace. It felt like the edge of something uncertain. Lily looked at Dante. His shirt torn, blood streaked across his arm. He should have looked dangerous. Instead, he looked human, exhausted. His voice was low when he finally spoke. "My men are sweeping the docks. They'll find the rest of them by sunrise after that. It's done, no more wars, no more debts." She nodded, staring at the ground beneath her feet. The city she had once tried to disappear into now held every ghost of her past, her father, her brothers, her secrets. "What happens to me now?" she asked softly. He turned his gaze to her. "You go home to your family. You give your father this evidence and you make sure he uses it to rebuild, not destroy." He paused. "I'll make sure the Corsetti name doesn't stand in your way." His words hit her harder than she expected. Home. The word felt like a wound she hadn't dared to touch since she left Boston. She wanted to believe she could go back, but she also knew the truth. People like her didn't get to go home. They survived. They adapted. They built new lives from ashes. Before she could answer, a sound broke the fragile silence, the crunch of gravel behind them, both turned, guns raised. A figure stepped out of the shadows, holding a pistol aimed straight at Dante. The morning light hit the man's face, and Lily's blood froze. Declan, his eyes wild with fury, his clothes soaked from the rain. "You should have stayed out of this, O'Malley girl," he growled. "You ruined everything. Flanagan's gone because of you, and I'm not leaving without finishing what he started." Dante shifted slightly, blocking her with his body, but Declan's hand was steady, the barrel fixed on his chest. One wrong move and it would be over. Lily stepped forward, her voice shaking. "Don't do this, Declan, please, it's over." "No," he snarled. "It ends when I say it ends." He moved to pull the trigger, and time seemed to slow. Lily didn't think she just acted. She grabbed the gun from Dante's holster, lifted it, and fired. The sound tore through the morning air. Declan stumbled backward, eyes wide, disbelief carved into his face before he fell. The echo faded, leaving only the ragged sound of her breathing. She dropped the gun, trembling. Dante caught her before she could collapse, his arms steady around her. "It's done," he whispered. She looked up at him, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I didn't mean to." He brushed her hair from her face, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. You did what you had to do. You survived, that's what matters. By noon, the city was alive again, the headlines already buzzing about police raids and missing men. The alliances that had ruled Chicago for decades were crumbling. One by one, Patrick O'Malley returned to Ire land with his surviving sons, vowing to rebuild his empire. Clean, Dante handed over the evidence, then disappeared from the spotlight, his name wiped from every file, every deal, every whisper. Weeks later, Lily stood in the Corsetti garden, the roses bright against the fading light. She was teaching a group of children, sign language. Mrs. Corsetti sat nearby, her smile proud and peaceful. The sound of laughter filled the air, something Lily hadn't heard in years. It felt like the world was breathing again. A familiar voice came from behind her. You've changed this place. She turned to find Dante standing by the gate, dressed simply for once. No suit, no armor, just a man she barely recognized. His smile held warmth and exhaustion, and something deeper. She walked toward him, unable to stop the pull between them. I thought you were gone, she said. I was, he replied. But some things are worth coming back for. He took her hands in his touch warm, steady grounding. She felt her heartbeat settle for the first time in what felt like forever. The war that had defined their families had ended, not with vengeance but with mercy, and in its place something fragile but real had taken root. Mrs. Corsetti watched them from the garden, her hands moving gracefully in the fading light. She signed to Lily quietly. My son told me once, he didn't believe in redemption. Now he does because of you. Lily smiled, her throat tight with emotion. She signed back. Maybe we both found it together. The sky turned gold as the last of the sunlight touched their faces. Dante leaned closer, his voice low. You once said you just wanted to disappear. Maybe it's time you finally let yourself be seen. She met his gaze, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel afraid. The world around them was still dangerous, still imperfect. But standing there in that quiet garden with the man who had once been her enemy, she realized something. Peace wasn't a bow. Forgetting the past, it was about surviving it and learning to love what was left. As the wind stirred the roses and the city lights flickered to life in the distance, Lily whispered the words that closed the story of a lifetime. It's over, and for once she truly believed it.